Hello everyone, welcome back to the Java interview questions preparation series. In today's video, we are going to talk about interfaces in the Java. So just to keep the video a bit shorter, I have divided this topic into the two different parts. In this video, we will talk about the first part and we will try to understand some of the basic questions about the interfaces. So without further delay, let's try to understand all about the interfaces in the Java. Again, I have created one small presentation in order to understand the questions. Wherever possible, we will go through the practical examples as well. So the very first question that we may get is what is interface in a Java, or why do you use interfaces in the Java, or how do you declare an interface in the Java. So basically an interface in a Java is like set of rules that a class must have to follow. We should use interfaces as it allows multiple classes to share the same behavior. So this is the basic definition of an interface in the Java. Interface in the Java is like a set of rules that a class must have to follow. So just to give some idea, let's try to understand it by one example. Imagine we have a remote control as an interface. It has buttons like power on, off, or volume up, down. The interface tells different devices like TV, sound system what to do. Like it is giving the actions to the TV, sound system remotes, like what to do. It is giving actions like power on, power off, volume up, volume down, something like that. So it is giving, it is telling the devices like TV, sound system what to do, but it is not telling how to do. It is up to the TV and sound system itself, like how to do the actions. But it is just like an interface, it's just telling the actions to those devices. Different devices like TV, sound system implement their own way of working. So this is how the interface basically works in the Java. Now, let's try to declare one interface first of all, and we will try to use the interface. So if I just go to the IntelliJ, over here, I have created one package called as the interfaces. In that, let me just create one interface. So over here, let me just choose the option of interface and let me just give the interface name as a remote control, something like this. And then this remote control interface can contain some actions. So as we discussed, it might contain the actions like power on and then let's suppose power off, something like this. And let me just give the semicolon. So as of now, let's keep these two actions only. We have remote control interface that contains the power on and power off actions. Now, these are the basic actions that this interface is giving. Now, whoever is going to implement this interface must have to give body to these two different methods, like must have to give the behavior to, to these two different methods. So let's suppose if I have one class called as TV remote, and this TV remote implements this interface. Now we are getting the error, and if I just hover on it, we will get these suggestions to implement the methods. Like now whatever methods that we have given inside the interface, a class must have to override these methods. So this is how the interface basically works. So over here, as we have said already, an interface is in a Java is like a set of rules that a class must have to follow. So in this case, this interface have created some rules, that is power on, power off, and the class must have to follow those rules. So this is how the interface basically works. Now, if I just go to the next slide, we have a couple of more questions like what elements can interface contains in the Java, or what can be defined inside the Java interface. So this is kind of very important questions in terms of the interview. We have to understand an interface in the Java, like what are all the different components that interface in the Java can contain. So in the interface, we can give the constant variables like public static final variables. Then we can give abstract methods. Then we can give default and static methods. But this feature got added in like Java 8 onwards, and Java 9 onwards we can give the private methods also. So we have different use cases for these different kind of methods. We will try to understand all of those practically. But let me just quickly go to the next slide also, because we have the similar set of questions over here. So the next question that we may get is, what access modifiers can be used for an interface methods? Like what is the use of default, static and private methods? Can we give body to the methods inside the interface? So these kind of questions or similar questions you might get, but the answer is pretty simple. So the answer is, we can declare the public methods. Public means the default abstract method. So for the abstract methods, we don't have to give the body. It will be by default abstract methods. And for the abstract methods, we cannot use private, protected, or package level access modifiers. So we cannot use private, protected, and package level access modifiers for the abstract methods. We can only give the public access modifier. Now let's try to understand these default abstract methods or abstract methods, public abstract methods. So if I just go back to the IntelliJ over here, if I just go back to the remote control, we have created this power on and power off methods. By default, these methods are abstract methods. We don't have to give the abstract keyword. By default, it will be a abstract method. Now, what is abstract method? Abstract method is nothing but a method without any body. So this is the basic definition of abstract method. And and as you can see, the power on, power off methods don't have the body. So they are by default abstract. Now we don't have to mention the abstract over here with the help of abstract keyword, because they are by default abstract. Similarly, if I just try to use abstract keyword, it will work. Now the access modifier that we can use with this method is a public. So if we use public, then again this method is by default public itself. We cannot use, like as I said, we cannot use private access modifier. Because why we cannot use private access modifier? Because as we have used a abstract keyword over here, the body to this power off method must be given by the child or a subclass, right? And if we make it as a private, it will not be inherited. So we will not be able to overwrite the method. That is the reason we cannot use a private keyword. And same, we cannot use a protected also. So the only access modifier that we can use is public itself, as you can see over here. And any abstract method inside the interface is by default public uh, in terms of access modification. Now the next point is, whatever abstract method that we declare, the child class must have to override those abstract methods. As we have already seen in the TV remote, we are overriding the power on and power off methods. Now the next question that we may get is, how to call these methods. It is pretty simple. Let's try to give one simple statement in. And now what we can just do, we can just create a main method over here. Inside the main method, we can create object of TV remote class that we do with the normal classes. And then we can call our power on and power off methods, something like this. And if I just try to run this, we should be able to see the messages that we have just given inside the body of the methods. And yes, as expected, we are able to see these messages. Now, we talked about these abstract methods. Then the next then the next methods that we can give is a default methods. So default methods and static methods, they got added since Java version 8 onwards. So default methods are basically used to add a new functionality without breaking existing implementations. Default methods can have the body, and if child class wants, child class can override that body. So let's try to understand this. If I just go back to the IntelliJ, and over here, if I just go back to the remote control interface, inside the interface, let's try to use one default method. So for this, we have to use a keyword called as a default, then void, and then over here, let me just add volume up, something like this. Now again, as this is the default method, we cannot keep it without a body. We must have to give the body. So over here we can just give a body like inside default method, something like this. Now over here, uh, as we have already seen why these default methods are uh, like important. Okay, so let's suppose if I have just added this volume of functionality uh, as a abstract method. So let's suppose if I just add volume up, something like this. Again, this method will be a abstract method by default, and it will be a public by default, right? But as soon as I added this volume up, if I just go back to my class, we will we will we will get the error. The reason why we are getting the error is because now a new abstract method is added into the interface, and a child class must have to implement that method, right? So over here we must have to implement this method. Now we can implement this method easily over here, but let's suppose if we have the interface, and if there are thousands of child classes, right? Then in order to compile the code, we must have to fix those thousands of child classes, right? And that can be a bit of a headache to the developers. So that is the reason these default methods got added into the uh, Java interfaces. So what we can just do, if we just want to add a new functionality without breaking the existing code, then what we can just do, we can just write one default method inside the interface, and we can just write the default method inside the interface. By this way, it will not break the existing code. Any child class, if want to override the default method, then it is like available. We can override the default methods inside the child class. Now again, as of now, I have just used a default method called as a volume up inside the TV remote class. If I just go back and if I just try to call this method TV remote dot volume up, then yes, it is available. We can just run the code, and we should be able to see the message from the default method. And yes, as expected, we are getting message from the default method. Now as I said, if child class wants, child class can override the default method. So we have to give public void, and then we have to give this name, and we can just give the statement like overridden default method, something like this. And now we can just give one annotation called as at the rate override, just to make sure that we are not uh, doing anything wrong over here. And then if I just call this volume up method, and if I just run the code, we should be able to see the overridden message. And yes, as expected, we are able to see the overridden message. So this is how we can work with the default methods. Similarly, we have the static methods. Again, static methods also have a body and belongs to the interface itself. But the only difference that we have in the default methods can be overridden. On the other hand, static methods cannot be overridden. So if I just go back to the IntelliJ and if I just try to make this default method as static method, then in this case, we will start getting error in the child class. And what it is saying? It is saying that method does not override method from its superclass. So in this case, we cannot use override. Why? Because volume up method is now a static method and we cannot override the static methods. Then the next question that may arise is how to call this volume up method, because if I just right now we have this volume up method over here also and we are the calling volume up method. So in this case it is giving us the body from the child class itself but is not giving us body from the interface. So how to call this? So in this case again we just have to use remote control dot volume up. Again, the normal behavior that we use with static, we just have to keep the interface or class name and then we have to call the method, something like this. And yes, as expected, we are now uh, getting the expected output on the console. Now again, lastly, we have a private methods also. Like these private methods got added into the Java 9 onwards. Why these methods got added? These methods got added uh, because to reduce the code redundancy used in the default and static methods. So basically, private methods are used inside interfaces to avoid code duplication in the default or static methods. It cannot be accessed by implemented classes. Now again, as the method is private method inside the interface, we will not be able to access the private method outside of the interface. That is, subclass will also be not be able to access the private method. It is just uh, a method which is accessible only within the interface and just to reduce a code redundancy. So for example, let's suppose if I have one default method, default void, suppose volume up, and we have one more, suppose static method called as a volume down. As of now, I'm just giving the names just to understand the concept, something like this. And over here, whenever this method will get called, we just want to print one message that is a common message, something like a key is pressed, right? So in this case, if I just want to print that message, what we have to do? We have to use one system.out.println and we have to give the message like key is pressed, and similarly we have to give the message inside the volume down method also, which is key is pressed. Now over here this might work, right? But let's suppose we can reduce this code redundancy. So we have these duplicate statements, right? So instead of giving these duplicate statements, what we can do? We can just use one private method. Let's suppose private void and display. And inside this private method, we can just give this message. And now wherever required, we can just call this private method. So we can just call display over here and display over here, something like this. Now again, we are getting the exception inside this static method. Let's see what it is doing. It is saying that non-static method display cannot be referenced from the static context. So in this case, if we just want, we can just use a static keyword with a private method also. So in this way, we can use these private methods inside the uh, Java interfaces. Now, if I just go back to the TV remote um, class and let me just remove this because this doesn't exist, something like this. And again, let me just remove this also. And right now we are just calling this power on, power off method. We are just calling this uh, TV remote dot volume up, and then remote control dot volume down, something like this. And if I just try to run the code, we should be able to see these common messages. Yes, we are able to see these common messages. That is, key is pressed. Now, if I just try to call this display method directly, we will not be able to call, because display method is specifically private and it is specifically meant for a remote control interface itself. It is not accessible outside of the interface. So this is how the private method works. Now again, in short, if someone asks you what are the different access modifiers that we can use within the Java interface methods, or what is the default static and private methods, or what are the different components of uh, Java interfaces, then the answer is pretty simple. In the Java interface, we can give a abstract methods which will be by default public. We will not be able to use private, protected, or package level access with the abstract methods. Then we will be having a default methods, which this feature got added from the Java 8 onwards. So default methods will have the body to it. The main purpose of default method is to add a new functionality without breaking the existing code. The default methods will be can be overridden from the child class. On the other hand, we will also be having static methods. This feature also got added from the Java 8 onwards. So static methods are basically belongs to the class interface itself, and those static methods will not be overridden. We can give the body, but again we cannot change the body. And lastly, we will be having a private methods. This feature got added from the Java 9 onwards, and the main purpose of the private method is to reduce the code, is to reduce the redundant code actually. So whatever common code we have, we can give that common code inside the private methods, and those private methods will be accessible inside the interfaces only. Those, as the methods are private, we will not be able to access outside of the interface. So this is how the Java interface works. Now the next questions that we have is, can an interface have constructors? Can interfaces have instance variables, or can we create object of an interface? So this is kind of similar questions that we make it. So answer is pretty simple. An interface is incomplete because it contains only abstract methods, right? As of now, as we have just seen, we have the default and static methods, but specifically, um, it contains abstract methods also, and that is the reason it is incomplete interface. And as the interface is incomplete, we cannot create object of an interface, because the interface itself is incomplete, right? So that is the reason we cannot create object of the interface. And as we cannot create object of the interface, it doesn't support a constructor, because if at all we are not able to create object of the interface, then we don't need a constructor, and that is the reason it doesn't support the constructor. And also, as as the interface doesn't have the constructor or doesn't support the constructor, it doesn't allow instance variables to be used. It doesn't allow instance variables, because in order to initialize instance variables, constructor is required. So it is kind of a chain, because the interface is incomplete, because it contains the abstract methods, right? So that is the reason interface is incomplete. And as the interface is incomplete, we cannot create object of the interface. As we cannot create object of the interface, it doesn't support the constructor. And as it doesn't support the constructor, it doesn't allow instance variables, because uh, because in order to initialize those instance variables, constructor is required. So that is the reason we cannot we cannot uh, give the instance variables inside the interfaces. So this is how the questions will get asked. The questions are pretty similar, but we have to keep in mind the basic structure of the interface, as I have given it inside the answer. So this is all for today's video. We have gone through the couple of questions that we may get around interfaces in the Java. We still have a few questions left back that we will see in the next video. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video.